Hello everyone, hope you're having a good day. Today is day 4, week 3. Continuing on again where we left off yesterday in the book of Nehemiah. We'll start off in verse 6 today. Our kickoff scriptures over in Proverbs chapter 21 verse 1. Solomon writes, "The king's heart is like channels of water in the land of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes." Again, that's Proverbs 21, verse 1. Ready to move is our subtopic for today. And as I've been, I'm going to read our scripture over in Nehemiah first. Starting off in verse 6, we're going to read down to verse 9 today. Scripture says, "And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, How long will you be gone, and when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates, and the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river, and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen." That's where we stop. Okay, so kicking off in our text for today, again, our subtopic's ready to move. Tony writes, "Will you be ready when God gets ready to move? If you're going to make an impact on your community, if your church is going to take part in the transformation of this society, you need to have a plan." That's what Nehemiah had. During those months he was waiting on God to answer his prayer. Nehemiah wasn't just daydreaming. He had a definite idea of what it would take to rebuild Jerusalem. And he had a definite time in mind. So when God turned the heart of King Artaxerxes around like a channel of water, Nehemiah was all set and ready. It was divine sovereignty and human planning and responsibility working in perfect harmony. Sovereignty and planning go together. They're not in conflict. Some people will go to one extreme and say, if God is going to do it, then why should we do anything? When he wants to make it happen, it will happen. The other extreme says we don't need God, we'll do it ourselves. And Tony's right, you see a lot of one or the other. Both extremes are wrong. God definitely arranged for Nehemiah to go with clout because it was God's divine timetable. God's sovereignty is necessary because he has to balance what he is doing in your life with what he's doing in someone else's life so that all things work together for good. And I believe that's very important, like divine visitation. Both parties have to be ready for what's about to come. He's very correct about that. I like that he pointed that out. We can't do anything without God because Psalms 24 verse 1 reminds us that he knows it all. Nehemiah couldn't have gotten those letters to the king's forest by his own scheming, but when the king of heaven decided Nehemiah needed some of his royal timber, he simply moved Artaxerxes to draw up the letters. That would belong to God, not to the king of Persia. But Nehemiah still had to ask. He needed a government grant to accomplish his plan. So he asked for it when he realized God was answering prayer and giving him favor before the king. When he realized that Nehemiah didn't know he was going to have that conversation that day, you see how thoroughly he had thought everything out. He knew his responsibility was to be ready when God in his sovereign wisdom said it was time to move. In the Think About It section, Tony writes, God's sovereignty means he decides what happens. Your planning means you are ready whenever it happens. We must position ourselves to be ready when God decides it's time to go. And a lot of that, as what we've seen here, is all about prayer and staying in deep harmony and communion with God. And that is how he prepares us for any mission, any task. That's how when we know when it's time to go, when it's time to patiently wait. Y'all have a good day. God bless you.